So I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning and started the agenda for tonight. I'd like to read out to you the subjects that I think follow on naturally from what we shared last evening. And maybe we'll get through most of it, maybe we won't. But at any rate, if you hear an old favorite friend in this agenda, start reflecting on it, and when we get to it, you know, we'll toss the ball back and forth. I think almost everybody who's sitting here knows the fashion that we inevitably start sharing back and forth our mutual experiences and our mutual feelings about these things. This is what we're going to do tonight. Time sort of ran out, as Billy said last night. We couldn't. So I've got, first of all, I started with 1 through, 55? And I've forgotten the 2 most important things, so I put 0, and then 10 minutes later I remembered the second most important thing. So I start off with 0 and 0, 0. So here is 0. Great masters rarely use occult experiences. 0, 0, the veil. Have you ever heard of it? That's very important.
I think I read it in a book called Some Results.
Yeah, something about the
It
veil.
was mentioned in that.
You think it was?
I
Yeah.
think so.
I
Has a familiar
guess I must have had a slip of the pen and slipped it in there. Yeah. And then number 1 here, Bob is infinite, so it's no trouble to do a million things all at the same moment. 2, regular spontaneous contact with Baba. Number 3, open one's heart to Baba. Number 4, what is the avatar's role in our lives? A, originally. B, starting with involution. And C, today. That covers quite a gamut there. 5, I get mad at Baba. Number 6, the 4 roles of Baba in creation. You think that's enough to discuss for a while? Yes.
You wanted to add the both shoulders story to tonight's agenda, didn't you?
Oh, yes, Fred, the one that we did, yeah.
And what's number 55?
Well, you know, each one of these is divided into 10 divisions, and then each division into 5 subdivisions, and so actually that gets up around 200 and some odd. Yeah, 75, I think, doesn't it? I made a miscalculation. 275. There we are, anyway. But at any rate, shall we start off with 0, that the great master rarely uses occult experiences. And I think that's terribly important, because can I be just sort of downright frank with myself and with you?
This is late, go ahead.
Just about everybody that I know, you know, absolutely adores stories about Baba where he really pulls the miraculous. But let's be quite frank about it, because they're fun stories, they pack punch, and because, what do we say, well, it's quite obvious he's a great master, just look at what he did. So they're stories that we like to tell other people too, because they have a lot of punchlines. But how many times have you read, for instance, in various of Baba's writings, that he never does miracles? How do you reconcile all of this? How do you reconcile the 2 statements? I never do miracles, and yet there are so many things that are on record which we all love to tell each other. But
Baba says the miracles
well, now this is the evening when we speak frankly, and I speak even frankly to my old pal, you, immediately, and say, well, what does that mean, Adele?
the faith of calling out his name.
Mm-hmm.
That Baba said that a million times.
Yeah, I know he said it, but what does it mean? You know, I'm just poor old stupid Don, and many times I get tired of being as stupid as I am. But I've heard a lot of these punchlines through the years, and every once in a while I suddenly sit back and say, God, I've heard that for 50 years now, and what does it really mean? You know, I sort of wake up and say, well, what does it come down to? It has sounded so wonderful, absolutely so wonderful, So this is why I can, in all seriousness, say to Adele, it's a beautiful statement, you know, but what does it come down to practically? I'm not running it down, but I think now's the time, you know, when we just sort of sit down simply and in friendly fashion with each other, and we're trying to examine the practical mechanics that are really important day by day in our lives. So I asked Adele.
I don't want to digress too much, but
Now you're not going to escape that way. I'm on to those sort of tricks already.
for me, it tells me that I need to hold on to God. It's very devotional in nature, and it's also based on faith, because I have full conviction, that's why their father is the father. So to repeat his name can only be repeated if, from the very heart, deepest heart.
Sure.
And holding on to him.
Yeah. But I'm not sure that I get the connection between that and miracles. You're saying something that I happen to believe in tremendously also, Adele. But just before going on with maybe another line on that, let's ask Margaret, because she raised her hand spontaneously also. And let's ask Margaret what her thought was
Well, I
at that
just
point.
feel that it's a miracle that we're all here together tonight, and Don is here with us tonight. It's a real miracle. Baba doesn't do miracles, and he's a liar, because we have to.
That's good, strong words, Margaret. Bless your heart.
He's a good miraculous. Here we are.
Yeah.
We all have these different paths to pass, and if we want God bad enough, we really should try to do it. And I can tell you one thing for sure: the ego is a tough cookie. I mean, you can't get away from that ego. He'll try and get you every single time.
We're going to get
So
it to translate that into French for us. The ego is a tough cookie. We got to get that in French.
Je pense que MeherBabaLibrary ne fait pas de miracle. Je pense que c'est miraculeux que nous sommes ici tous ensemble.
She says that it's miraculous we're here.
Mais bien avec vous, parce que je pense que vous êtes miracle aussi, n'est-ce pas? Parce que Papa vous aime comme vous aime, et vous l'aimez comme vous l'aimez.
So to love Baba as one loves him is a real miracle. And certainly this I completely agree with. But let's get back still to this subject. Let me ask you, because it's certainly obvious that it was for some reason that Baba brought up so many times this question of miracles and saying, I do not do miracles. Why do you think he made such a point of it? No, you were over there. Or was it Candy? Oh, yes, your son's supporting you tonight. Yeah.
No, I think that it has to do with faith, like Adele was saying, and that if you really, like I've had situations in my life where I asked Baba to help me, and I have no doubt that he would at all. It's like the faith of the grain of mustard, the mustard seed.
I remember something about that.
Yeah, something about that in the Bible. And it's like I don't think that what Bob is saying is that he's not doing a miracle, but you by your faith. So he says, I don't do miracles. I think that you have the faith that is so total. You know that he's going to help you or do whatever it is. That it happens. That in the universe, that it just has to happen. Because it's like there's no such thing as a vacuum, you know, you empty yourself out so much that whatever it is has to pour in. That's what I think about it. So when Baba says, I don't do miracles, he doesn't. He says, you know, I don't think he actually goes, I think I'm going to do a miracle for that person. Because, you know, I don't think it's like that. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't agree completely, much as I love you, Candy. Because he says too many times in different places, I do not do miracles. And somewhere or another, I think we have to scratch our heads and say, why is this such an important statement? Why does he say it several times and very, very prominently? I think he's trying to set the stage to even out a balance somewhere, because when he repeats something several times, usually it's because something's out of balance that needs rebalancing. Way back in the back there. No, you.
Well, I have, maybe in highest of the high, he said it because he was talking to the general public. He didn't want people to come to him just for miracles, because that's why they were coming to him. But once you love him, that's a different story. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, an uncle wants to give a little kid all the nice things he can. I mean, you know, within your karmic range, I mean, we know that things have happened that we could call miracles, whether Baba wants to say he did them or not. I mean, maybe he appoints bad souls to do them. Or maybe he technically doesn't do them, but he says, look, you guys, delegates the, you know, some advanced souls to do the miracles, but only for people that already love him, or to bring people to him or something like that. Not just miracles for their own sake, like the general public would want. And maybe that's the sense in which he said he never does miracles, or he hasn't done them.
All right, so your first and basic point was that Baba does not want us to come to him and to ask for his love or to sympathy, be asking for miracles. He doesn't want that to be the base of our coming to him. And you know, I just know instinctively that that has to be part of the story. You think it's all of the story. Incidentally, can you hear somebody who's talking in the back of the room? Is it all right? Could you understand what she was saying? Well, that's great then. But let's go on a little bit further with that. What about the history of miracles? What have we been reared in as little children? What sort of background do we have on the subject of miracles? Can we get a little bit, maybe, of clues from that as to maybe, again, what Baba may be trying to balance that got out of balance in the past? It's intrigued me tremendously that for a great individual in the Catholic tradition to be considered for sanctification, the first thing that must be proven are two provable, verified miracles on the part of the individual. This is the first major step. And that's rather interesting, isn't it? But then, really, what do miracles have to do with spiritual unfoldment? What's the relationship? What do you think between the two? You know, we're getting really down here to the subject, what is spiritual progress? What do we go through? What's Baba trying to do with us? Is he trying to get us so we can pull miracles? Or is he trying to keep us away from this? And why? What's this all about? Yes.
Well, I've been watching some Christian television, and there's a fellow on television that does miracles, especially, you know, healing type things. And I've always wondered about that because, you know, people have their karma to go through, and Baba kind of wants us to, you know, go through our karma and not try to get around it or have it.
Are you sure?
I think so.
Do you all agree? No, because this is another important point that he's raising. I mean, really, is he here just to keep our nose to the grindstone? And if that's all, then where does he enter into all of that as the avatar? No, it's a big, complicated question we're looking at here. I studied when I was looking at various different mystic faiths before I became a Sufi, before I ever knew anything about MeherBaba. But I had done 6 weeks of very concentrated thought concentration experiments, which were so extraordinary, so miraculous in what happened that I suddenly realized, my God, creation's a lot more complex than I would ever have dreamed. And so I looked around and I looked around and I looked around. And one of the things that I looked at and I studied for a year and a half with probably the best astrology teacher in America until I could do a horoscope and advance it and regress it so on and compare what I saw from the character analysis in the horoscope with my 2 or 3 friends whose horoscopes I did. And I saw that it was a very exact science. But then I looked around And I saw, okay, it can also predict events. And what do we do with astrology now? We look at it in order to escape all of these things that might come along that might be inconvenient or really maybe slightly or totally disastrous in our lives. And just exactly as you say, well, where does all of this fit into our karma? If we block our karma, and if we block it effectively again and again and again, how's the poor thing ever going to get worked out in such case? So I tossed astrology aside at that particular point, not because I decided it was phony, because I'd proven to myself that it was an absolute precise science, as precise as the chemistry and the physics and the mathematics that I had studied in the university. But I saw it being used to obviate the painful and difficult situations in life that were coming along. And if the avatar's got anything to do with our daily life, what's this doing to the avatar and what he's trying to get us through? I mean, you can't help but ask yourself. Fred,
It
please.
was like the story you said about the woman in MeherBabaLibrary who asked Baba in 1956 if she would grant,
He would grant
her this request to have a baby because she apparently could not have a baby. And he said, your love for me will grant you that baby, but I have to affect 1 million other people's lives.
He said you cannot imagine the millions of readjustments in other people's lives that I've got to make in order to grant this request, and I do it only because of your total love for me.
Did she have a baby?
Oh yes, she did.
Wow.
Very shortly afterwards, you know.
At least 9 months.
At least 9 months, you know.
No, it's a miracle.
If I remember, it was twice. Yeah. But again, let's go back fundamentally. What is all this business of miracles? What does Bobby himself say on this subject? Does anybody remember? He says something very, very crystal clear on this subject. You see, I'm poking away. I'm seeing how many people have done their homework with Bob's words. It's important. Because he clears up a lot of these things for us, you know. Does anybody remember what he says about miracles? Yeah.
They can be used to free humanity from lower desires. When they're used appropriately and by the person in their evolutionary stage and path along the path.
Well, if he says that, that's not the particular thing I'm fishing for at this time.
I didn't hear that. What was it? What did you say?
Repeat it again a little bit louder, please.
Miracles can be used to free humanity from lower desire. It can be used to create a situation where it can release a certain block, a certain inner conflict, and a certain opening can occur. When that miracle is performed by a perfect master or someone of the right authority, then it benefits the person and it benefits the person who used it.
Well, I'm not sure about that. You know, I just have to be honest with you. Because what you say there is a bit in contrast to a particular, very clear statement that he makes. I think we have 2 hands up down here to offer something, no?
No,
Yours?
no, definitely not.
Well, first of all, we have to determine what a miracle is. What's a miracle? Is it fulfillment of a desire? Is that what a miracle is?
No, a miracle is something which has virtually 0 chances of occurring as it does within the system of naturally functioning law at the time that it occurs. In other words, everything is moving in this direction, and all of a sudden, for no reason, there's a completely cross-countercurrent and something totally unexpected happens, which has absolutely no basis in all of the causes that one can see and test. It apparently has nothing to do with natural functioning.
That's the most brilliant, concise definition of a miracle I have ever heard.
Fred, let's go record that for television.
I would say that it almost sounds synonymous with grace. As you were explaining, of course, grace is outside the realm of natural law, so to speak. And I also
Yeah, right.
didn't Baba say something about, I do not take the karma of the world, my understanding. I he reduces the suffering from that karma. But the karma will be there. So he does not interfere with the cause and effect. However, he does have a base, and that is the miracle.
Well, let's go right into what he says in one of the discourses, because I think it's time to spread that in the record. He says very clearly that a real master, a great master, almost never utilizes an occult experience, miraculous experience, for one of his aspirants, for one of his lovers. And he goes on to explain a little bit, part of it in the same discourse, and part of it in another. And he says, just very simply, that a great master, this is still in the same discourse, will use it on a rare occasion in order to assist the aspirant when either he will be called on to undergo a great test of will, and he needs something to give him courage to go through this very tough situation. Or in another situation, perhaps, where the aspirant has had a long, draining, exasperating, fatiguing series of crises, and the person is just fed up and says, what the hell is this all about? You know, I mean, it happens in our lives. It probably happens too often. And the person needs to be recharged with some reassurance. But Baba doesn't say anything in that discourse that this is done every 2 months, you know, to recharge your battery. Nothing like that. One gets much more of the impression from what he says, and I'll tell you from my own experience, because I think I'm sort of an average statistical person around Baba. Something that I would call miraculous happens to me, just completely out of context, unexpectedly. So let's do justice to Baba. He says the problem is that a powerful occult experience given by a great master is so tremendously impressive, and it is so it is so exciting to the individual. It takes him into a different dimension, and naturally, what does he want? He wants a repetition of it. And so he wants a miracle in 2 weeks' time, and he wants a miracle in 2 more days' time, and he wants a miracle in 2 hours' time. And very rapidly, the person just almost refuses to function unless he's got miracles cropping up on the horizon all of the time. All right, so what Baba says is this forms a terribly powerful habit pattern for the individual. And so he says, first of all, that the real master, as soon as he feels this is the time when I've got to give John or Nellie a miracle, in order really to propel him along the path, to give him confidence in that added spiritual force, immediately he's got to start deconditioning that individual from wanting more of him. And then he goes on to explain and says, this has nothing to do with spirituality. There is not the faintest trace of real spirituality in a miracle. It's got nothing to do with it. All this is really like a coach gives a football team a pep talk, you see. That's what he is. He's the coach, and the old football team's tired at that particular point, and so he comes along and gives a pep talk, but it's a spiritual pep talk that he gives. And then the team, by golly, they've got to go out and fight the next part of the battle. So what does he say? The other part that he says, and then we'll go back to your opinions, your ideas, your own observations. He says that a real master, this is the other part of it, and this is 0, 0 now. A real master much prefers to use natural methods in daily life. This is exactly what he says. Isn't that extraordinary? In other words, instead of a miracle, he takes Nancy and he makes her car bust down, maybe. And Nancy jumps up and down and says, my God, I just paid $500, put a new transmission in the thing, and you know, and she gets all upset. And then maybe Nancy suddenly thinks, oh, Blanche, this is getting too close to home, isn't it?
No, I was just thinking of Nancy.
Poor Nancy, let her car blow up. So there we are. And then suddenly Nancy thinks that, gee whiz, this is the sort of thing that I think I ought to bring under control, you see, and comes back. So he tries to teach Nancy, and he tries to teach all of us identify incidents in normal daily life. And then he uses this term. A real master much prefers to leave the aspirant under the veil. You know, the same veil that the avatar was under when he was born into creation himself. He didn't know he was the avatar until Baba Shan kissed him. You don't know that you're on the spiritual path, and for heaven's sake, don't pretend you know which plane you're on the spiritual path. You know, if you're under the veil, if you're under Baba's spiritual guidance, you don't know where you are. You don't know which plane you are on. You don't depend upon miracles. I mean, you just have faith and love in him, and you go along. So every time that I run into somebody who says, I love Baba, and then the next breath they say, of course I'm on the third plane, but I'm waiting for him to put me on the fourth plane, I say, this is nuts. Either he's lying, or else he has nothing to do with Meher Baba. In both cases, let's not have anything more to do with him. You know, just automatically. This is true. The real master leads you under the veil. You've got no spiritual signpost. You probably don't hear the music of the spheres. You don't have the wonderful scent of violets when you wake up and there are no violets because it's midwinter and a few things like that. Come along, Candy, you're used to this. So, anyway, but this, you know, this is really being on the spiritual path. And this is what poor old Elias down in Marseille, if you read a little bit about Elias, said, my God, you know, I've been coming to these Meher Baba group meetings now for 5 or 10 years. All of a sudden, I look at this passage here, which talks about the successive phenas and feelas and so on. I said, I've never experienced these. What have I been doing all of this time? And the whole group said, my golly, Elias has got a real point. What has he been doing? We don't remember anything about experiencing the phenas and the feelas either. And then somebody else from a lovely Catholic background says, but you know, he must be leading us under the veil. Don't you think that's what the real answer is? And so everybody felt a little bit better about it, but we can discuss that more. But Bob is so clear about this, you know. I don't do miracles. You know, I really think to put the top back on that particular bottle before the genie gets out anymore. I really think that this is Don Stevens' theory, and it may be absolutely cockeyed. I think that after Jesus Christ did the beautiful miracles on the occasions when he had to, remember the woman who went to the well when he was pulling water out of the well, and Jesus Christ kept talking about the water, you know, within one and so on. He was talking in mystic terms. She kept talking, I don't know, about it being an ordinary well, and she wasn't certain how he'd get the water out of it. Finally, he gets discussing and starts talking about her personal life and how many times she's been married and hasn't been married. And then she wakes up, you see. I mean, gee, this is terrific. All of this business about mysticism, she hasn't understood one word about that. But as soon as he obviously knows about her love life, you know, this is miraculous, you know. She pricks up her ears. She goes, tells all of the townspeople about it. So, you know, when Jesus Christ would really get fed up trying to teach people simply the inner truths, and he'd pull the rabbit out of the hat. And my golly, that created a sensation, always. But then, what do we do over the next 1,000 or 2,000 years? We say, that is the spirituality. You know, we mistake the cart for the horse or the horse for the cart. I don't know which it is here. But at any rate, we get confused as to what the reality is. So I think next time the avatar comes around and has a lot of contact in Christian countries, he's got to start setting the balance right. And what's the best way for him to set the balance right? I don't do miracles. You know, he just disclaims it. Oh, he may do something a little bit strange underneath the table once in a while, you know. But we don't call that a miracle. We don't call attention to it because it's necessary to set the balance right. And because you and I have been so trained unconsciously to equate this with spirituality that we've got to get shaken out of it. But this is why it's so terribly dangerous for us to get involved in occult phenomena and somewhere or another confuse that with progress on the spiritual path. Manifestations of his presence and his love for us and his fulfilling his spiritual responsibility when he selected us. Remember, he selected us to take on the spiritual responsibility of our progress towards God realization. The next one that I wanted to toss up at you, because for me it's absolutely fundamental. One of the first things that ever was tossed back at me when I began to make a little propaganda about how deeply I felt and I observed. This all went back to this experience of my working for the oil company, and Bob was saying, I put you there. And when he said that, I knew also that he had put Adele where she worked, and he put Phyllis where she worked probably, and put Billy where he was, and Charlie, and you know, all of us, that he had a deep hand in forming the basic manner in which we become involved in our lives in the present lifetime. So all of this gets back to the fact that he is deeply involved in our lives, absolutely. But how does he do it, somebody says. In fact, I've had people come back to me after I've given a rousing talk about making out loud reports to Mayor Bobby, you know, and somebody comes back 5 years later and said, Don, I was really inspired, and I tried to do it once, and I was so flummoxed about saying anything out loud, I didn't do it. And then I suddenly thought, well, what happens if, say, 500 Baba lovers are all trying to tune in on Baba with their problems at the same time? I mean, he can't take care of poor little me and Adele at all the same time. It's asking too much, you know. And this is a good point. So the first thing that I would like to toss out, now getting into the mechanics of how Baba gets into our life, how under the sun can he really be in touch with a few million Baba lovers scattered around the world who are looking to him? Adele?
I was just thinking, when I first met Baba, one of his first messages was he said, only God is real. Nothing exists save God. And God is love. And so, if only God is real, and we are just with the phenomena of that reality, the drop souls of that one real soul, this takes God realization to really explain that.
All right, you know.
It's no further than everything else.
Sometimes Adele and I talk in slightly different language, but I would say I feel intuitively she's exactly on the right point, because she talks about the infinity of God. And so, Adele, will you allow me to translate that over into Stevens's lingo for us? And to me, it's a fairly simple thing. I observed myself when I'd be with Baba in India, the simple fact that there were various things that would happen rather frequently, which could only be explained that Baba had the capability of focusing consciously on several things at the same time.